So let's start with everything that everybody is talking about is fentanyl, right? Every time you turn around, you're hearing about fentanyl. Where is this coming from? How did we get here? So fentanyl is an opioid, and we can track opioid use actually back to before zero, back to BC. But when it became really popular as opium was in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, and even the 20th century. And then more recently, synthetic opioids. Morpheus was the god of dreams, and morphine was the first isolated from opium in 1805. So that's how far back we're talking about it being used. You guys are probably familiar with this Morpheus and Morpheus from Matrix. I'm sure you guys are all familiar, but true statement, right? Body can't live without the mind. Okay, your eyes are glazing over because you're thinking, oh my God, chemistry, look at all the bonds and everything. But I put this up because heroin metabolizes into morphine, 2 steps. So when we are looking at blood from DUIs or from people who are deceased, who had overdosed, we're looking for heroin. We're not looking for morphine because we will see that if it's had a chance to metabolize. We're looking for that first step. The 6-monoacetyl morphine, 6-MAM. Where's it coming from? Heroin is an organic compound. It's grown from poppies. These are what poppy fields look like. Those little foil wrappers that you're seeing, well, sometimes when somebody gets pulled over, this is what law enforcement sees in the floor of the car. And you're thinking, oh, that's just gum wrappers, somebody put it, could be, but it could be drugs. I'm going to show you a few people along the way who you're probably familiar with. Certainly this guy from Hunger Games who died of a mixture of drugs, and most of what we're seeing in overdose deaths now is a mixture of drugs containing opioids. This had heroin and cocaine, benzodiazepines, and amphetamine. Fentanyl is synthetic. It is made in a lab. This graph is actually really significant because it's from September 2022. And what it's showing is a rolling 12-month number of overdose deaths in the United States. So if you go back to the very first one, which is January 2015, rolling 12 months was about 50,000. Then you go to when it hit 100,000, which was April of 2021. 6 years. In 6 years, we went from 50,000 people dying a year in the United States to 100,000 people dying in the United States. And it's gone up since. Fentanyl is synthetic. It can be 50 times to 100 times as powerful as morphine. In fact, a lot of what you'll see is morphine equivalents. You'll see that as a unit. And that's kind of how you measure the strength of opioids. This map is showing the increase in fentanyl use in the Midwest. It was up 33%. In the Northeast, about 3.5%. In the West, 94%. I left this slide in from my last presentation. This is actually old because it goes from 2002 to 2014. But I thought it was important because it gives you a really easy way to visualize for yourself how much opioid use has gone up, right? So red is bad. That dark red is really bad. And you see how from 2002 to 2014, how the entire country is almost covered in red. Princess Leia died of a mixture of cocaine, heroin, MDMA, and other opiates. Fentanyl tracking. So where is it coming from? Why is it here? How did it get here? Well, a lot of the fentanyl is made in China. And you see the arrows going from China to Canada, Mexico, and the United States. But fentanyl has precursors that may or may not be made in China. Now India is getting into the picture, unfortunately. So we have some of the precursors for fentanyl being provided by India. Sometimes they're going from China to India made and then shipped to Mexico or Canada to the United States. Or the precursors as well as fentanyl are going from China to Canada to the United States to Mexico and then brought in across the borders. And I think Joe's going to talk a lot more about that. but it's getting here. It's crossing our borders. As you can see on the bottom right, there's a lot coming across the border from Mexico. And this is from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and these are just some of the different ways that people have tried to hide the illicit drugs being brought into the United States in their vehicles. So I don't know how many of you know, but I'm actually a radiologist. I went to medical school, did a 5-year radiology residency, a 2-year neuroradiology fellowship, worked as faculty at the Cleveland Clinic for several years in the University of Maryland, came to Cincinnati. I still practice radiology and neuroradiology, but this is an X-ray. You knew that, right? On the left. Well, what this is, and on the right, it's actually a CT scan that's been reconstructed to show you what's actually in the abdomen. So this is a guy who was a drug mule. He swallowed these drugs and was trying to cross the border, trying to avoid detection, so they swallow it. And one of these broke open. That's enough to overdose somebody. I mean, that's a lot, actually. And this is what it looks like on the CT scan on the right. So those of you who are squeamish, close your eyes for the next slide. This is what it looks like when you have to cut it out of somebody in the bottom right. That's an intestine that's full of these capsules, these little plastic wrapped things of powdered drugs. And you think, well, if they survive, what happens? When you eat something, what happens? If they survive, they get past the police, law enforcement, they get to wherever they're going, they're gonna poop it out, right? That's what it looks like when it comes out. And then they'll clean it up a little bit, wrap it in a new plastic baggie, you know, and then go out and give it as free samples or sell it on the street, and you have no idea whose body it traveled through. You have no idea how it got from, if it's heroin, from plant to processed to on the streets. If it's manufactured in a lab, who did it travel through to get here? So if somebody's offering you some free drugs, remember that picture. So the number of pills containing fentanyl, and you're hearing about it on the street, but it's just skyrocketing. Joe's going to tell you the numbers, but in our office back 5 years ago, we saw about 2,000 pills. Last year, we saw 7,000 pills that were tainted with fentanyl. This year, as of May of this year, the first 5 months of this year, we saw over 23,000 pills tainted with fentanyl. We have no idea when it comes into our office, and Joe just told me they had another seizure of 25,000 pills, so that's over 50,000 probably for this year. So the numbers, you can pretty much guarantee that if you're getting something off the street, it's going to be tainted with fentanyl. And you know, there's no laboratory, there's no FDA, there's nobody telling these guys, oh, hey, you can only put this much in there. You know, they're just throwing it in, putting it in a pill press, putting it out on the streets. So you have no idea what you're taking.